me, Matthew, 22 years old, just out of college with a degree in data analytics. Spent 4 years learning how to make sense of numbers. Probably should have studied people instead. Landed an internship at a big shiny tech company, the kind of place with beanbag chairs and free kombucha on tap. Felt like I'd made it. Like this was the first day of the rest of my life. Walked in wearing my one good suit. Felt immediately overdressed. Everyone else was in hoodies and expensive sneakers. HR lady gives me the tour, hands me a laptop, and points me to my department, marketing analytics. Sounds important. The open plan office is huge, a sea of desks and monitors. My designated spot is at the end of a long table, right next to the other intern. Her name is Chloe. Seems nice enough, a little nervous. She's a marketing major, admits she doesn't really get the numbers part of the job. Then our manager comes over to welcome us. This is Madison. She's maybe in her mid-30s, sharp haircut, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my car. On her desk, a coffee mug says "Male Tears" in a fancy looping font. My first red flag, but I'm a 22-year-old intern. I'm not saying anything. Madison gives us the welcome speech. It's not about the company's goals or what we'll be learning. It's a monologue about her mission to deconstruct the patriarchal norms within the tech space. She talks about creating an environment where female voices can finally be amplified. She gives Chloe a warm, encouraging smile, tells her she's so brave for entering a male-dominated field. She looks at me, and the smile vanishes. I just get a nod. And this is Matthew. The tour of duties begins. Madison explains that our main job is to support the team by pulling data for their reports. The system they use is old and clunky. A real dinosaur. It takes forever to generate anything useful. First assignment is simple. Pull the weekly user engagement stats. I get it done in about an hour. The system is slow, but the logic is easy. I double-check everything, format it neatly in a spreadsheet, and send it over. No reply. I see Chloe struggling. She keeps getting error messages. Madison spends a solid 45 minutes at her desk, patiently walking her through every single step, telling her it's not her fault. The system was probably designed by men who didn't consider different learning styles. Chloe finally gets her report done by the end of the day. Madison sends a team-wide email. A huge welcome to our new interns. Chloe has already hit the ground running and delivered her first report. Fantastic initiative. No mention of my name. I figure, okay, it's just the first day. Don't make waves. Head down, do the work. The next couple of weeks fall into a pattern. I get my work done quickly and efficiently. Chloe struggles and Madison praises her for persevering through adversity. I try to be helpful. One afternoon, I see Chloe about to have a meltdown over a SQL query. I lean over and quietly point out a small syntax error in her code. Just a missing semicolon, an easy mistake. She fixes it, and it works. She's relieved. The next morning, Madison calls me into a small glass meeting room. She has a serious look on her face. She tells me a concern has been raised, that my behavior yesterday could be perceived as undermining. She asks if I understand the concept of mansplaining. I'm just sitting there, completely stunned. I explain I was just trying to help. She says she appreciates the sentiment, but I need to be more self-aware. Says that I should let my female colleagues find the answers on their own, that it's part of their empowerment journey. I just nod. What else can I do? So I stop helping. I keep to myself. I do my work. A month into the internship, Madison announces a new project. She wants to streamline the weekly reporting process. Says it's a great opportunity for the interns to make a real impact. This is my chance, I think. This is my area of expertise. I spend the entire weekend at home, not relaxing, but working. I write a Python script. It connects to the company's database through an API, pulls all the necessary data, cleans it, organizes it, and spits out a perfect formatted report in about 30 seconds. It's a thing of beauty. It turns a 3-hour manual task into a 30-second automated one. On Monday morning, I'm excited to show it to Madison. I catch her before the morning meeting and explain what I've done. I show her how it works on my laptop. She watches with a blank expression. When I'm finished, she just says, "That's very technical, Matthew." She says that solutions need to be inclusive and accessible. Tells me that relying on complex code could alienate team members who aren't as tech savvy. She says she appreciates the effort, but she's looking for something more human-centered. I'm crushed, but I try not to show it. Later that week, at the team meeting, Madison brings up the reporting project again. She says, Chloe has been working on a brilliant user-friendly solution. Chloe gets up and presents a PowerPoint template. It's just a slide deck with empty boxes where you're supposed to manually copy and paste the numbers from the old clunky system. She added some company logos and used a fancy font. Madison is beaming. She goes on for 5 minutes about how Chloe's approach is a paradigm shift in collaborative workflow, how it's intuitive and doesn't require a gatekeeper with specialized knowledge. She's looking right at me when she says that last part. The team applauds. My script is never mentioned again. The office culture starts to wear on me. There are mandatory lunch and learn sessions. Topics are always about things like unpacking your privilege or recognizing microaggressions in the workplace. During one session, the speaker asks for examples of microaggressions. Madison raises her hand and talks about how frustrating it is when male colleagues interrupt her in meetings. She does this right after she cut me off mid-sentence during the morning brief. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. Another time, there's a critical server issue. The website is down for a major client. Everyone is in panic mode. We're all in the main conference room, throwing ideas around. I see the problem in the error logs. It's a memory leak in one of the applications. I wait for a pause in the conversation and calmly explain what I think the issue is and suggest a fix. Madison immediately holds up a hand. Matthew, let's take a breath. Your tone is coming across as very alarmist. We need to maintain a calm and supportive atmosphere. She turns to the rest of the room. Let's not jump to conclusions. Does anyone else have a less aggressive take on this? The team is silent. They all know I'm right. Finally, Chloe, trying to be helpful, says, maybe we could try turning it off and on again? Madison smiles. Thank you, Chloe. A great suggestion. Let's start with the basics. They waste the next hour rebooting servers randomly while I sit there, watching the client's complaint emails pile up. Eventually, the senior engineer, a guy who doesn't report to Madison, comes in. He looks at the logs for 10 seconds, says, there's a memory leak, and applies the exact fix I suggested an hour ago. The website comes back online. Madison claps her hands together. Great teamwork, everyone. See what we can accomplish when we all contribute? She never acknowledges my initial suggestion. The big test for the interns is the final project. It's a significant piece of work that we have to present to the department director. A good presentation could lead to a job offer. The project is to analyze customer churn and build a model to predict which clients are likely to leave. This is my home turf. I live for this stuff. I dive deep into the data. I work late every night. I build a predictive model from scratch. It's elegant, accurate, and has a 92% success rate in backtesting. I document everything meticulously. Chloe is assigned to work with me. Her job is to create the presentation slides. She's good at making things look pretty. I'll give her that. She uses nice graphics and keeps the text to a minimum. I walk her through the model multiple times, explaining how it works in the simplest terms possible. She just nods and says, wow, that's smart. I'm not sure she understands any of it. The day of the presentation arrives. We're in the big boardroom. The director is there. He's an older guy, probably started with the company when it was just a garage startup. He has a reputation for being sharp and no nonsense. Madison kicks off the meeting. She starts with a 5-minute speech about her passion for mentoring young women in STEM. She talks about how she's so proud to have created an environment where a talent like Chloe could flourish and take the lead on a complex data science project. She gestures for Chloe to start the presentation. I'm just standing there, holding the remote for the slides, feeling like a ghost. Chloe starts talking. She's just reading the bullet points on the slides. She sounds confident enough when talking about the strategic implications and business synergy. Then the director raises a hand. He interrupts her. Let's cut to the chase, miss. The model. How does it work? Chloe freezes. She looks at her note cards. She looks at the screen. She looks at Madison with pure panic in her eyes. Well, she starts, it uses advanced algorithms to analyze data points. The director stares at her, unimpressed. Which algorithms? What's your confidence interval? Did you account for seasonality in the training data? Silence. Chloe is completely lost. She can't answer a single question. Madison tries to jump in. What Chloe is saying is that the holistic approach of the model. The director cuts her off. I'm not interested in buzzwords. I want to know if this thing actually works or if it's just pretty charts. His eyes scan the room and land on me. You're the other intern, right? You've been silent this whole time. Step up. Explain your model. I step forward. For the next 10 minutes, I talk. I explain the decision tree architecture, the feature engineering I use to clean the data, the cross-validation methods to prevent overfitting. I answer all of his questions, and then I answer the questions he hasn't even asked yet. I can see a flicker of understanding and then respect in the director's eyes. When I'm done, the room is quiet. The director just nods slowly. Good. That's a real piece of work, son. He looks at Madison. My office, in 5 minutes. Then he gets up and leaves the boardroom. The meeting is over. Chloe looks like she's about to cry. Madison, however, doesn't look sad. She looks furious. As soon as we're back in the main office area, she pulls me aside. Her voice is a low, angry hiss. What was that? Were you trying to humiliate her? She accuses me of deliberately sabotaging Chloe's presentation. She tells me it's a classic move from a man who can't handle a strong woman taking the lead. She says I have a toxic sense of competitiveness and that I sucked all the air out of the room. I just stand there and take it. I don't say a word, because I finally understand. It doesn't matter how good my work is. It doesn't matter if I'm right. In her eyes, I will always be wrong. So I do nothing. I don't defend myself. I don't argue. I just give her a completely empty look. Then I turn around, walk to my desk, and start packing my small box of personal items. My notepad, my pen, the one plant I brought in. I don't need to be told I don't have a future here. I walk past Madison's desk on my way out. She's not even looking at me. She's consoling Chloe, who is now openly sobbing. I don't say goodbye to anyone. I just walk out the big glass doors and into the afternoon sun. The internship was over. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a strange, cold emptiness. I promised myself 2 things that day. First, I would never again work for someone I didn't respect. And second, I would become so successful that people like Madison would have no choice but to respect me. Or, at the very least, get out of my way. That was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of a much, much longer one. I went home that day and just sat on my couch for hours. The sun went down, and I didn't turn on the lights, just stared at the wall, replaying the whole internship in my head. The fake smiles, the buzzwords, the casual dismissiveness. It felt like a different world, one where the rules I thought mattered, work hard, be smart, get results, were a complete joke. For a week, I did nothing. Sent out a few resumes without any real energy, felt hollowed out. Then that feeling turned into something else. A cold, hard anger, not the loud, shouting kind, the quiet kind that fuels you. I decided then and there I wasn't going to let that experience define me. It was going to be a footnote, a lesson in what to avoid. I started my job search in earnest, ignored all the big famous tech companies. I looked for small, hungry startups, places that couldn't afford to be inefficient, places where results were the only thing that kept the lights on. After a dozen interviews, I found one. It was a tiny company, maybe 10 people, working out of a cramped office above a pizza shop. The founder interviewed me himself. He was a gruff guy in his 40s, looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He didn't ask me about my feelings or my collaborative mindset. He gave me a laptop and a real-world data problem. You've got 2 hours, he said. Show me what you can do. 2 hours later, I had a working model and a list of actionable insights. He looked over my work, nodded, and said, "You start Monday." That was it. That was the whole interview. It was the best job I ever had. The work was brutal. 80-hour weeks weren't uncommon, sometimes 90. I practically lived in that office. Dinner was usually the pizza from downstairs. I had no social life. Friends stopped calling because I never went out. My world shrank until it was just my desk, my monitor, and the problems I had to solve. But it was honest work. There was no politics, no grandstanding. My boss didn't care about my tone. He cared if my code was clean and my analysis was sharp. If you had a good idea, you spoke up. If your idea was bad, he'd tell you why, and you'd move on. Meritocracy in its purest form. I thrived. About 6 months in, we were on the verge of losing our biggest client. Their user data was a complete mess, and our old system couldn't handle it. Everyone was panicking. The founder was tearing his hair out. I saw an opportunity. I went home that Friday, and I didn't sleep. I spent 48 hours straight, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower, building a new data processing engine from the ground up. The same kind of focused, intense work I'd put into my final project at the internship. On Monday morning, I ran the client's messy data through my new system. It worked perfectly. I didn't make a big presentation. I just walked into the founder's office, put my laptop on his desk, and said, "I think I fixed it." He watched the system work, his eyes getting wider. He didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he just looked at me and said, "Name your price." I didn't ask for a raise. I asked for stock options. He gave them to me without hesitation. That was the turning point. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a partner. I had skin in the game. The next few years were a blur of growth. My system became the backbone of our entire operation. We started landing bigger and bigger clients. We hired more people. I was put in charge of building the data science team. I hired people who were smart and driven. I didn't care about anything else. My only rule for the team was bring data, not drama. We moved out of the office above the pizza shop and into a real corporate building. We went from 10 employees to 50, then to 150. I became the director of analytics. I was 25 years old. I finally had some money, bought a decent apartment, a nice car. But I didn't slow down. The work was too interesting. We were outmaneuvering huge billion-dollar companies because we were faster, smarter, and more efficient. One day, out of curiosity, I looked up my old internship company online. I went to their Glassdoor page. It was a graveyard. 1-star review after 1-star review. Toxic management. Culture of favoritism. All talk, no action. Several reviews mentioned the marketing analytics department by name. They described a manager who valued performative wokeness over actual results. They said all the talented people had left. One review, clearly from an engineer, said, "The department is run by someone who thinks a PowerPoint is a substitute for a functioning algorithm." I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just me. The system she built was fundamentally broken, and now the cracks were showing for everyone to see. Chloe, I found out through LinkedIn, had left the company about a year after I did. She was now a brand strategist at a cosmetics company. Good for her. Madison was still there. Her title was now senior manager, a promotion for overseeing a sinking ship. Figures. Year 5 was the big one. Our startup had become so successful that we were a threat. One of the giants in the industry, a massive corporation, decided it was easier to buy us than to compete with us. The acquisition talks took months. As a key stakeholder, I was in all the meetings. The deal they offered was life-changing. The founder, who was now set for life, decided to retire and go sailing around the world. The acquiring company wanted me to stay on. They didn't just want our technology, they wanted the brain that built it. They offered me a position, Vice President of Strategy and Operations. It was a huge title, a seat at the big table. The job was to identify and fix underperforming divisions within their massive portfolio of companies. To basically go in, diagnose the rot, and either cut it out or fix it. I accepted. My first week was a series of high-level briefings. I was given access to the performance metrics of every single company under their corporate umbrella. I spent days poring over spreadsheets, revenue charts, and efficiency reports. One company's name kept popping up, flagged in red for poor performance across the board. Falling revenue, high employee turnover, shrinking market share. It was the company where I had been an intern. The corporation had bought them a few years back, and they had been a drag on the balance sheet ever since. The CEO of the parent company called me into his office. He was a lot like the director from my internship, but older and even more direct. "You see the problem with that division," he said, pointing to the red numbers on the screen. "It's a mess, bloated, inefficient, and rudderless. I want you to go in there personally." "What's the objective?" I asked. "Your objective," he said, leaning forward, "is to fix it or gut it. I don't care which. You have my full authority." A slow smile spread across my face. I hadn't thought about Madison in years. Not really. She was just a ghost, a bad memory. But now she was about to become my project. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I didn't just look at the numbers. I read every internal report from that company for the past 2 years. I learned the names and roles of every manager, every team lead. I created a full dossier on the entire operational structure. I knew which departments were dead weight and who was responsible. Her name appeared over and over again. Senior Manager Madison, head of a department with a ballooning budget and plummeting output. The data told a clear story of incompetence, shielded by corporate bureaucracy. The day before I was scheduled to go over, my new executive assistant sent out a company-wide memo. It announced a mandatory all-hands meeting for all department heads. The purpose? To introduce the new VP of Strategy and Operations. Me. I picked out my suit for the next day. It was a simple, dark gray suit. Not flashy, but it was perfectly tailored. The kind of suit that doesn't yell for attention. It just states, quietly and definitively, who is in charge. I went to bed that night and slept like a rock. No anger, no excitement, no desire for revenge. Just a calm, professional focus. Like a surgeon preparing for a very precise and very necessary operation. The time for emotion was over. It was time to get to work. The next morning, I drove to the office building. It was the same gleaming glass tower I had walked out of 5 years ago. Felt smaller now. I took the elevator straight to the top floor, to the executive wing, a place I'd never even seen as an intern. The CEO's assistant greeted me and led me to a large corner office. My new office when I was on site. It had a panoramic view of the city. I could see the top of my old apartment building from here. I spent an hour with the CEO, finalizing the game plan. He reiterated my mandate. I had complete autonomy. Hires, fires, budget cuts, all my call. His final words to me were, "Don't be sentimental, be surgical." At 10 a.m., it was time for the meeting. The main boardroom was on the floor below. I walked down the stairs, not taking the elevator. My assistant was waiting for me outside the door. She gave me a subtle nod. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and walked in. The room was filled with about 20 people, all mid to senior level managers. They were all chatting, drinking coffee, looking at their phones. The CEO was at the head of the table. He stood up as I entered. The room went quiet. And then I saw her, Madison. She was sitting halfway down the table. She looked older, a few more lines around her eyes, but the same sharp haircut, the same expensive-looking blazer. She was looking down at her tablet, completely oblivious. She hadn't even looked up to see who walked in. "Good morning, everyone," the CEO's voice boomed. "Thank you for coming. As you know, we're making some significant changes to improve operational efficiency. To that end, I want to introduce the man who will be leading that charge." He gestured towards me. "This is Matthew, our new Vice President of Strategy and Operations." I watched her. Her head snapped up at the sound of my name. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the entire world just seemed to stop for a second. You could physically see the color drain from her face. Her professionally cheerful mask just melted. It was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock, the kind you see on people in car crashes. Her mouth fell slightly open. The tablet in her hand slipped, clattering onto the polished table. No one else seemed to notice. Everyone else was politely applauding, turning to look at me, some with smiles, some with apprehension. But her, she was frozen, a statue carved from disbelief. I gave a slight formal nod to the room. I didn't smile. I walked to the front, standing next to the CEO, and turned to face the managers. My eyes swept across the table, making brief contact with each person. I saved her for last. Our eyes met again for a fraction of a second. I gave her nothing, no recognition, no flicker of triumph, just the cold, impartial gaze of a superior assessing a subordinate. That, I could see, was what terrified her the most. The CEO said a few more words and then handed the meeting over to me. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm and even. "I won't take up too much of your time. I prefer to deal with specifics in smaller groups." I clicked the remote in my hand, and the projector screen behind me lit up. The first slide was simple, a graph. Overall company performance over the last 3 years, a gently sloping downward trend. "This," I said, gesturing to the screen, "is why I'm here. This is unacceptable." I clicked again. The next slide broke down the performance by department. Most were flat or slightly down. One was a disaster, a single steep blood-red line plummeting towards the bottom of the chart. At the top of the slide, the title read, Marketing Analytics, Quarterly Output, and Budget Variance. This, I said, my voice dropping a little lower, is where we will begin. A nervous cough broke the silence in the room. I could feel every eye turn towards Madison. She looked like she had been punched in the gut. She was pale, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table. She was trying to compose herself, trying to put on her manager face, but the panic was winning. I didn't let the moment linger. My approach is data-driven, I continued, moving to the next slide, which was filled with KPIs and performance metrics. We are going to conduct a full operational audit, department by department. We will analyze workflow, individual performance, project ROI, and budgetary efficiency. I paused, letting that sink in. The goal is not to punish, but to optimize. We will reallocate resources to high-performing teams and restructure those that are failing to meet their targets. Restructure, the corporate word for fire everyone. Finally, I looked directly at Madison. Her eyes were wide, pleading almost. We will start with the Marketing Analytics Department. Madison, I'll be meeting with you in your office in 1 hour. I expect you to have the last 3 years of performance reviews for every member of your team, all project budget reports, and a detailed breakdown of your department's strategic initiatives ready for my review. I didn't say it like a request. The meeting was over. I gave a final nod. That's all. Thank you for your time. The CEO gave me a subtle, approving look as the managers started to file out of the room, whispering amongst themselves. Madison didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the blank projector screen, as if the ghost of that red line was still burned onto it. I went back to my new office and drank a coffee. Exactly 1 hour later, I walked down to her department. The atmosphere was like a morgue. People were at their desks pretending to work, but the tension was so thick I could taste it. I walked straight to her office, a glass box in the corner. She was inside, frantically arranging stacks of paper on her desk. She looked up as I entered, and for the first time, she spoke to me. Matthew, she said, her voice a little shaky. I had no idea. It's so good to see you again. Congratulations on your success. It was a desperate, transparent attempt to be friendly, to pretend we were old pals. I didn't play along. Madison, I said, my voice flat. I remained standing. Let's see the reports. The fake smile died on her lips. For the next 2 hours, I dismantled her entire department on paper. I went through the numbers, line by line. The data was damning. Projects with no clear ROI. A budget that had tripled while productivity was cut in half. Performance reviews that were full of vague, positive-sounding fluff, but contained no actual metrics. I asked her direct questions. Why was this project approved when the initial data showed a negative expected return? Can you explain the justification for the 40% budget increase for team building and morale initiatives while your department missed every key deadline last quarter? This performance review gives your top-paid analyst and exceeds expectations, but his actual output is the lowest on the team. Why? She couldn't answer. She stumbled. She used buzzwords. Holistic approach, synergistic alignment, empowerment-focused framework. It was the same empty corporate language she had used to shut me down 5 years ago. But now, it had no power. It was just noise. I wasn't an intern anymore. I couldn't be dismissed. Finally, after cornering her on a particularly blatant piece of financial mismanagement, she cracked. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "I have built a culture here, a supportive, inclusive culture. That's more important than your cold, hard numbers." "Is it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "A culture that produced this?" I tapped the pile of reports showing nothing but failure. "This isn't a culture. It's a country club you're funding with the company's money." She stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she whispered. "This is revenge for the internship." I leaned forward slightly, placing my hands on her desk. "You think this is about you? You think I've spent the last 5 years of my life plotting to get back at a mediocre manager from a summer internship?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Madison, I barely remembered your name until I saw it on a spreadsheet this week. You're not a nemesis. You're a rounding error, a data point in a failing system that I am here to fix. I stood up straight. You are a symptom of the disease this company is suffering from. A belief that good intentions are a substitute for good results. My job is to cure the disease. And it starts right here. I took a single step back towards the door. I've seen enough. I'll have HR send you the details of the departmental restructuring by the end of the day. I walked out of her office without a backwards glance. I didn't need to see her face. I knew what I would see there. The complete and total collapse of a worldview built on a foundation of sand. I spent the rest of the day finalizing my report for the CEO. It was simple. Dissolve the entire department. Retain 2 junior analysts who showed promise and transfer them to another division. Eliminate the rest of the positions, including the senior manager role. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was necessary. Late that afternoon, as I was packing my briefcase to leave, an email notification popped up on my laptop. The subject line was just my name. Matthew. It was from Madison. I opened it. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just one sentence. You were right. I stared at the words for a moment. I thought I would feel something, vindicated, triumphant. But I felt nothing. It was just data, an admission of failure from a failed system. I moved the email to the trash folder without replying. My work here was done. As I walked out of the building, the sun was setting. I didn't look back. The past was the past. My focus was on the future, on the next problem to solve, on the next system to build. This time, I was the one writing the rules.